The illegitimate Maduro regime has displayed little to no political will to counter drug-related threats and curb drug trafficking in Venezuela.
Its president demanded that we immediately hand over our land, our oil, and our minerals because they supposedly belong to them.
It is necessary for the national security of the United States to act aggressively against these narco-traffickers.
What does a Venezuelan ship have to do with drugs? Nothing. And it is even absurd to think that oil revenues are being used to finance drugs. It's complete madness to repeat this.
The United States will continue to take decisive actions to weaken the illegitimate regime and deny Maduro and his cronies access to illicit revenues.
The government of the United States is doing nothing to stop its massive public health crisis.
As Secretary Rubio said just last week, the goal here is to bring security and stability to the hemisphere, to the region.
The government of the United States does not have jurisdiction over the Caribbean when it states that it will work with the countries of the region to deal with the problem of drugs. Well, it ignores them and tries to impose its power in international waters.
The illegitimate Maduro regime has displayed little to no political will to counter drug-related threats and curb drug trafficking in Venezuela. In fact, it has facilitated the illicit production and distribution of narcotics, creating conditions that have allowed drug traffickers and other transnational criminal organizations to operate with impunity. It is necessary for the national security of the United States to act aggressively against these narco-traffickers, as traditional drug interdiction methods have proven ineffective at stopping the flow. The United States will continue to take decisive actions to weaken the illegitimate regime and deny Maduro and his cronies access to illicit revenues. This includes profits from the sale of oil. As Secretary Rubio said just last week, the goal here is to bring security and stability to the hemisphere, to the region we live in, which has not received enough attention, to bring the elements of American power to achieve that, to do it in partnership with as many countries as are willing to work with us in that regard. That's the goal. And with that, I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. The representative of Venezuela has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I believe, sir, you made a very clear your messages in your lengthy statement before, so I'll give you one more time, but I will ask you if you can be short. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. The government of the United States of America is stubborn in its intention to ignore international law and to lie with regard to Venezuelan legality. What does a Venezuelan ship have to do with drugs? Nothing. And it is even absurd to think that oil revenues are being used to finance drugs. It's complete madness to repeat this, and this is only magnified by propaganda. The United States claims to fight against drugs, and yet has pardoned the biggest trafficker of drugs of Latin America that was in prison in the United States and that trafficked some 400 tons. And he was pardoned. That is the fight of the United States against drugs. The government of the United States is doing nothing to stop its massive public health crisis when many of the drugs that are sold in the United States are manufactured by laboratories within the United States, many of the major pharmaceutical corporations. Even when they say that fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction, the idea is to copy a line that is actually copied from the invasion of Iraq, when weapons of mass destruction were invented to fool the public, to accept a armed attack against Venezuela. What we've seen here is that the government of the United States does not have jurisdiction over the Caribbean when it states that it will work with the countries of the region to deal with the problem of drugs. Well, it ignores them and tries to impose its power in international waters by killing innocent civilians. That is not the combat against drugs. The use of military forces against innocent civilians is not combating drugs. Most importantly, the smokescreen has fallen when it has stated that it wants the entire Venezuelan oil industry. Mr. Stephen Miller stated that to return our lands, our minerals, our oil. What does that have to do with drugs? We're talking about pillaging, looting, recolonization of Venezuela. This is a conquering of the entire continent. It's the Monroe Doctrine, which we thought ended 150 years ago. Mr. President, all those present here, we are facing a massive violation of all international laws and immoral and indecorous purpose that we cannot support. Let us stop the lies. Let's work on the basis of truth and diplomacy. One of the countries sitting at this table has publicly stated that it wants to annex our country. On the 16th of December, its president demanded that we immediately hand over our land, our oil, and our minerals because they supposedly belong to them. He said that if we did not comply with his ultimatum, he would unleash the fury of the greatest navy in history on our country. Mr. President, we are in the presence of a power that acts outside of international law, demanding that Venezuelans vacate our country and hand over our Orinoco River, our Lake Maracaibo, our Margarita Island, our beaches, rivers, plains, and mountains. Otherwise, he will carry out an armed attack, which he has been announcing for weeks. This is the greatest extortion known in our history. A gigantic crime of aggression in progress, beyond all rational parameters, all legal logic, all historical precedent. But it's not just about Venezuela. The ambition is continental. The U.S. government has expressed this in its national security strategy, which states that the future of the continent belongs to them, with the enactment of the Monroe Doctrine in the 21st century now aggravated by the Trump corollary. Our liberator Simon Bolivar warned of this more than 200 years ago when he said, and I quote, that the United States seemed to be destined by Providence to plague Latin America with misery in the name of liberty. End of quote. We want to alert the world. Venezuela is only the first target of a larger plan. The U.S. government wants us to be divided so it can conquer us piece by piece. The United States, which was an indispensable country in the construction of the United Nations and in the drafting of its founding charter, has today become an actor that seeks to impose itself on the fundamental rights of all states in the Western Hemisphere, even at the cost of destroying the UN. We have requested this meeting, aware that the U.S. government will not allow this body to adopt a decision that would put a stop to its sinister plan. The world should know that last November, the U.S. government was the only one that prevented an agreement in the Security Council to condemn attacks against civilians on the high seas and to call for détente, dialogue, and diplomacy. The U.S. government is preventing the Security Council from fulfilling its mandate. If in 1945 that country was a force for good, today it has become a state that threatens international law and peace and security. The world must know that the threat is not Venezuela. The threat is the current U.S. government. Mr. President, the murders in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean carried out by the U.S. government of the last few months are the first evidence of its plan to impose its power in the region in flagrant violation of international law and human rights. There have been more than 29 attacks resulting in more than 101 victims, non-combatant civilians, in the absence of armed conflict, who were coldly murdered, violating their right to the presumption of innocence and due process. Let it be clear once and for all that there is no war in the Caribbean. There is no international armed conflict, nor is there a non-international one, which is why it is absurd for the U.S. government to seek to justify its actions by applying the rules of war. The invocation of Article 51 of the United Nations Charter to explain terrorism against civilians, masked by the argument of self-defense, is a perverse distortion of the law, attempting to turn small unarmed boats in the Caribbean, thousands of kilometers from the United States, into alleged perpetrators of an armed attack with weapons of mass destruction. These are extrajudicial executions, willful killings committed by military force against unarmed civilians. We stated that before the Security Council on the 10th of October. Today, it is absolutely clear that the U.S. government is not only violating international law, but also its own domestic legislation. Today, when there are 4 times as many victims, they do not dare to show the recorded evidence of the killings, because their cruelty would provoke worldwide revulsion. Despite this, today, with more than 100 victims, the killer who roams the Caribbean claims that there is no end in sight to their crimes against humanity. Mr. President, on 16th of December, President Donald Trump publicly stated the following, and I quote, "Today, I'm ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going in and out of Venezuela," end of quote. This is a confession of a crime, specifically a crime of aggression, with which the President of the United States intends to turn back the clock of history 200 years to impose a colony on Venezuela. On 10th of December, meanwhile, U.S. military units violently assaulted a vessel engaged in lawful international trade in international waters in the Caribbean. They subdued and kidnapped the entire crew and illegally seized the cargo of Venezuelan oil, which was part of a legitimate and regular commercial operation. It was a robbery carried out by military force, which sets an extremely serious precedent for the safety of navigation and international trade.